On the day the college entrance exam ended, the school's bell pulled me into the small grove in front of the whole class. Just when I was still confused, she suddenly kissed me. A unique taste of a young girl spread in my mouth. Then, her voice choked up as she said, "Xiao Yu, I'm willing to give you my heart and all of my future. As long as you can agree to one thing, my life is yours too." She startled me. It turned out it was all because her mother was sick and urgently needed 600,000 for surgery. Although 600,000 to a rich underachiever like me is just half a month's pocket money, I still rejected her without a second thought, because the heart of an ice-cold top student belle seems very precious. Unfortunately, I don't believe in love. My parents could marry for the sake of the family's interests and maintain the image of a model couple for over 20 years. Do they have hearts? Maybe, but they've given their hearts to outsiders. So don't talk to me about hearts. I don't believe in it. I stood up straight and walked in front of her. I was a head taller than her. I could clearly see her trembling eyelashes and the glistening tears on them. I reached out my hand. She stiffened and unconsciously closed her eyes. My finger gently flicked her forehead. Bai Ningbing was stunned, opened her eyes and looked at me blankly. I pulled my hand back, looked straight into Bai Ningbing's eyes and said word by word, "Bai Ningbing, get this straight. Do you want me to be a scumbag who takes advantage of someone's misfortune, or do you want me to be a good person, show some compassion and help you out?" She was completely stunned, staring at me blankly, her mind clearly short-circuiting. But I was very patient, just looking at her like that. She finally reacted, her tense shoulders immediately relaxing. Bai Ningbing harbored a tiny sliver of hope, her voice as faint as a mosquito's buzz. "Please, I'm begging you." I shook my head decisively. "No way. I'm not a philanthropist. Even if I have a lot of money, I won't spend it on unnecessary things. After all, 600,000 is enough for me to buy dozens of Napoleon cats." Her pleading eyes instantly turned to despair. Seeing her on the verge of breaking down, the little bit of wicked interest in my heart also faded. I changed my tone. "But even if I don't want to be a bad guy or a good guy, we can do business together. I remember your academic performance isn't bad, so your future can be considered a potential stock. So I can lend you the money, as a personal investment. 600,000, I can transfer it to you right now." Her eyes immediately lit up with incredulous joy. "But I have one condition. In 10 years, you must pay me back 1,000,000. The interest rate isn't high, it shouldn't be difficult for you. Also, in the college entrance exam a month from now, you must get into Tsinghua or Peking University. This is the first step to prove you have the potential to repay the debt and also a risk control clause for this investment." She was like someone who just grabbed a life-saving straw, immediately nodding her head frantically, afraid I would change my mind. I left her my phone number, then turned and walked away, not bothering to see her expression. Coming out of the small grove, the sunlight shone on me, warm. Actually, I didn't care at all whether she would pay me back or not. 600,000 really is nothing to me. The contract terms were just for show. Otherwise, everyone would come running to borrow money from me, and no amount of money would be enough. Spending 600,000 to buy a little bit of smugness from doing a good deed today, and getting a close-up look at the belle's flustered state, wasn't too bad of a deal. After talking to the lawyer, I set a time and place, and forwarded the contract to Bai Ningbing, and that was that. I strode towards my original destination, a club activity room. Through the window, I could see the scene inside. My childhood friend, Liu Ruyan, was chatting animatedly with a punk-looking guy. The Liu family and my family can be considered friends for generations, with close business ties. So Liu Ruyan and I were also considered childhood friends. That wasn't the issue. Mainly, it was Liu Ruyan's older sister, Liu Qingshu, a truly proud woman. Beautiful and ruthless. Most importantly, she treated me very well. Every time she gave me pocket money, it was in the millions. For a good-for-nothing like me, she was a walking ATM. Furthermore, Liu Qingshu was about to get engaged to my sanctimonious older brother, Jiang Lingchuan, so in the future, she would officially be my sister-in-law. Making us even closer, my decadent life was even more secure. But recently, because of some punk Liu Ruyan's grades dropped from the top to average. This made Qingshu specifically ask me about the situation, so I knew I had to step in. After all, if you take someone's money, you have to help them out a bit. Before I could open the door, I bumped into a guy running out. He staggered back 2 steps, his eyes full of humiliation and unwillingness. I recognized him. He seemed to be a poor student that Liu Ruyan used to sponsor. His grades were very good and he was an honest person. Seeing this, it was probably the classic drama of I love my benefactor, but my benefactor loves a punk. I shook my head, feeling a little amused. This kid is too young. When rich people like us spend money to do things, it's often just a habit, a pastime to show off our status. It doesn't mean we're good people. If you're truly grateful, then work hard to succeed and repay them with benefits. That's how you deal with people. Bringing emotions into it is just asking for trouble. I ignored him and pushed open the ajar door. Liu Ruyan was talking to Tong Long, laughing her head off. When she saw it was me, Liu Ruyan's smile froze on her lips, her eyebrows immediately furrowed, and her voice filled with defensiveness and impatience. "Zhang Xiaoyu, what are you doing here? Are you also here to convince me to break up with Brother Long? Let me tell you, don't waste your breath. A useless young master of the Zhang family like you can't even manage your own life. What right do you have to meddle in mine?" I wasn't angry. I even found it a bit funny. I'm not meddling. I'm just curious. How did the good little girl of the Liu family, who always follows the rules, suddenly get into this type? Liu Ruyan raised her voice, with a look of contempt. "What do you know? Brother Long isn't like you pretentious rich kids. He lives authentically, he lives freely." She linked arms with Tang Long. "This is what you call living. Your cookie-cutter lives are the boring ones. That's what's a waste of a life." With that, she turned her attack on me. "Especially you, Jiang Xiaoyu. You're no good at studying, and you're no good at playing either. Besides being part of the Jiang family, what else do you have? You're completely useless from head to toe." I nodded, with a look of sudden realization. "I see. The winds of youth, right?" Liu Ruyan probably thought she had convinced me, a smug look appearing on her face. Tang Long also puffed out his chest, the look he gave me no longer as scared as before. The next second, I looked down at Liu Ruyan from above. "Sobered up yet?" Under my gaze, she unconsciously took a step back. Tang Long was still groaning on the ground, looking at me with eyes full of fear. I walked up to Tang Long. "Don't you like being authentic? Like being free? Come on, tell me how you feel right now. Feel free?" Tang Long was in so much pain he was sweating, unable to say a word. Liu Ruyan tried to pull me away, but my glare made her retreat. "Aren't you so tough? Why are you quiet now?" She was trembling, not daring to make a peep. I immediately lost interest. "With that little courage, you dare to hit on a rich girl." I dragged the still trembling Liu Ruyan and went straight to the notoriously rough area in the west of the city. I dragged Liu Ruyan out of the car and pushed her against a filthy alley wall. The strong smell of urine and rotting garbage hit me in the face. Liu Ruyan threw up on the spot. I pointed to some blonde punks cursing at the end of the alley, my voice as cold as ice. "See that? That's the wind of youth you like so much. Authentic enough for you, free enough for you. If you like it, he'll throw you over there right now." Liu Ruyan immediately turned pale with fear, gripping my hand tightly and sobbing. "I was wrong, Jiang Xiaoyu. Let's go home, I'm begging you." Just then, I caught a familiar figure out of the corner of my eye. It was Tang Long. He was limping, and while I wasn't paying attention, he had secretly slipped away from the other end of the alley. I couldn't be bothered to chase him. This kind of person wasn't worth me making a move again. Liu Ruyan clearly saw him too, and her face turned ashen. Her last shred of fantasy, along with that fleeing figure, was completely shattered. She stopped crying, just stood there dumbfounded, like she had lost her soul. I shoved her into the car, and she didn't say a word the whole way. When the car arrived in front of the Liu family's house, she opened the door herself and trudged inside. I didn't get out of the car. I just told the driver to turn around and head home. That night, I received a text on my phone. It was from Liu Qingshu. Xiao Yu, thank you. I replied with a "you're welcome" sticker, and that was that. As expected, the next 2 days at the Liu house were calm and peaceful. No one came looking for trouble with me. I knew this was definitely handled by my future sister-in-law Liu Qingshu. It seems my move wasn't wrong. My decadent life was secure. But the next day, I couldn't smile anymore, because Tang Long was dead, died in a car accident. It seems this future sister-in-law of mine is even more ruthless than I thought. I suddenly felt this house was a bit scary. Everyone wears an exquisite mask, coldly eliminating all obstacles. My elite older brother, Jiang Lingchuan, is like that, and so is my future sister-in-law, Liu Qingshu. Only I was the different one, someone who just wants to slack off. I suddenly shuddered and shot up in bed. I had to move out immediately. Get away from these ruthless people right now. You have to be alive to keep living the high life. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. The next morning, I carried my packed suitcase downstairs. My mother was in the living room, elegantly drinking her morning tea. Seeing me, she just nonchalantly raised an eyebrow, her voice calm. Where are you going? Sleep somewhere else. She didn't ask any more questions, lowering her head to continue reading a financial magazine. My nominal father was nowhere to be seen either. This house was as cold as an ice cellar. I dragged my suitcase and walked out of that magnificent villa without looking back. I had a penthouse apartment in the city center that I bought a long time ago, and now was the perfect time to use it. The apartment was very large and empty, and the fridge was empty. I drove to the biggest supermarket nearby. I needed to fill this new home with food and snacks. Pushing a shopping cart, I walked among the fully stocked shelves. I was like a shopping robot, motionlessly tossing items into the cart. As I passed a corner, I suddenly stopped. Because in a corner of the snack aisle, I saw a girl, secretly stuffing a bag of bread into her sleeve. She looked a few years younger than me, with a small frame wearing a faded uniform. She looked quite clean. It's just a pity her hands weren't so clean. I didn't say anything, just leaned against the shelf, crossed my arms and watched her with amusement. She was struggling to stuff it. The sleeve was too small, the bread was too big. She tried again and again, so anxious that her forehead was beaded with sweat. Finally, as if sensing something, her movements froze and she slowly raised her head. Our eyes met mid-air. I stared at her without saying a word. Within 10 seconds, her face turned visibly red. In those big round eyes, there was first shock, then panic, and finally, an inescapable sense of shame and humiliation. Her hand holding the bread trembled uncontrollably. With a thud, the bag of bread fell to the floor. It was as if all her strength had been drained, and her whole body went limp. She lowered her head, wishing she could bury her face in the ground. How boring. I walked over, bent down to pick up the bag of bread, and threw it into my shopping cart. Then I casually swept various types of cookies and candies from the adjacent shelf into the cart. Soon, my cart was piled high like a small mountain. I pushed the cart in front of her. She still had her head down, her whole body tense, as if waiting for a verdict. I lightly kicked her faded canvas shoes with the tip of my shoe and said calmly, "No money for food?" Her body trembled, then she gave a slight nod. A second later, as if remembering something, she shook her head vigorously. I was getting a little impatient. "You're nodding and shaking your head. Are you performing a mime for me?" "What is it?" My tone was a bit harsh. She was so scared by me that she jumped and shot her head up. Looking at me, the rims of her eyes were red, brimming with tears. Her lips moved, and a few unclear sounds came from her throat as she awkwardly gestured with her hands. I froze. In that moment, a thought flashed through my mind. Mute? I looked at her anxious and helpless appearance, and the annoyance in my heart immediately subsided. I regretted it. At this moment, I felt like a genuine asshole. The kind who would have to slap myself twice when I remembered it in the middle of the night. I didn't say anything else, turned to get another shopping cart, and filled it with non-perishable foods. Then, I pushed both carts and gestured for her to follow. She still didn't seem to have reacted. I couldn't be bothered to explain, so I just grabbed her wrist and pulled her to the checkout counter. After paying, I carried the bags, big and small, while she followed behind me, like a little tail, also holding a few of the lightest bags of snacks. After putting everything into my sports car, I told her to get in. She hesitated for a moment, but then opened the passenger door and got in. Then, I asked for her address. She took the phone, her small fingers tapping on the screen for a long time, before finally pinpointing a location. It was an old neighborhood, a rundown place I would never even pass through. I didn't say anything, just started the car. The car was frighteningly silent the whole way. She kept her head down, clutching the hem of her shirt. The car drove through narrow, dilapidated alleys, finally stopping in front of a tenement building that looked like it was about to collapse. I turned off the engine and helped her carry the groceries out of the car. The corridor was dark and damp, filled with the smell of mildew and other strange, indescribable odors. She led me to the third floor and opened a wooden door with peeling paint. A strong smell of Chinese medicine hit me. The room was very small, so small you could clearly see what an empty home looked like. Today was the first time I'd seen it with my own eyes. On a rickety wooden bed, a thin old woman was lying down. The old woman's eyes were closed, her breathing faint. The girl put the things down, ran to the bedside, skillfully tucked the old woman in, her eyes full of worry. I understood. It wasn't that she didn't have money for food, but that she didn't have money to treat her family member's illness. Stealing bread was probably because she was too hungry and didn't want to use her grandmother's medical money. This sob story again. I hate seeing this kind of scene the most. After the girl took care of her grandmother, she came to me, bowed deeply, then took an old notebook from the table and wrote quickly on it. On it was a line of elegant handwriting. "Thank you. How much does all this cost?" "I will definitely pay you back in the future." I found that line a little funny. Pay me back with what? By stealing again? I didn't say anything, just took out my phone and called my family's personal assistant. I spoke briefly into the phone. "Lao Wang, help me contact the special ward at the city's central hospital. In 15 minutes, send an ambulance to the address of the tenement building in the west of the city. They'll send it to you. Just charge the cost directly to my account." The whole process took less than a minute. The girl was completely stunned. Her mouth was agape, staring at me blankly, forgetting to cry, forgetting to write. I could understand. For her, the thing she would need a lifetime to dream of was something I could solve with a single phone call. I lightly kicked the luggage bag at her feet. "What are you spacing out for? Pack your things and get ready to go to the hospital." She snapped out of her daze and immediately started packing in a flurry. Actually, there wasn't much to pack. A few old, faded clothes, an enamel mug with a chipped handle. The ambulance arrived very quickly. Professional medical staff carefully placed the old woman on a stretcher. From beginning to end, the girl gripped the hem of my shirt tightly, as if afraid I would suddenly disappear. Although it was a bit awkward, I didn't push her hand away. At the hospital, everything was arranged smoothly. A special ward, with 24/7 nursing care, a team of top experts immediately began their consultation. I stood outside the bright, clean hospital room, watching the busy doctors and nurses inside, and the girl by the bedside, looking both bewildered and grateful. The bit of gloom in my heart over Tang Long's death seemed to have lifted a little. Spending money really can buy a good mood. Just then, my shirt hem was tugged lightly again. She held a tattered notebook out in front of me, on which was written, "How can I ever repay your kindness?" I leaned against the doorframe and looked at the girl. "I'm not saying I need you to repay me." She was in a hurry. She wrote very quickly in her notebook. Her handwriting was a bit messy, not very neat. "I can just take your money for free. You are a good person." I saw the two words, good person. The smile on my lips grew wider. In this day and age, even someone like me can be considered a good person. It's really great to have money, I interrupted her. First, I'm not some good person. Second, I've already said it. I'm the kind of person who hates trouble the most. You being difficult with me here is causing me trouble. Understand? She was a bit stunned by my twisted logic. She stared at me blankly, not knowing how to respond. I looked at her expression and sighed. I walked up to her. No more nonsense. I took the notebook and pen from her hand and scribbled in the notebook. Just consider it as me buying an insurance policy in advance. You study hard, get into a good university in the future, in case one day I fall on hard times and I'm begging on the streets. Just remember to give me a bowl of rice. After writing, I stuffed the notebook back into her hands. She looked at the words in the notebook, stunned for a long time. Then she looked up. Her eyes were as clear as spring water. Tears finally broke through. She didn't cry out loud, just shed tears silently. Each drop fell onto the tattered old notebook. I felt a little awkward and looked away. All right, don't cry anymore. Your grandmother still needs you to take care of her. What's the point of crying like this? I thought for a moment and added, what school do you go to? I'll have Leo Wang pay your tuition fees while he's at it every month. He'll have him transfer $5,000 to you for living expenses until you graduate from university and find a job. Don't tell me you don't need it. This also counts as an insurance premium. After saying that, I couldn't be bothered to watch this cheesy scene anymore. I gave the doctor a few simple instructions, then turned and left. Driving on the wide road, I suddenly felt it was a bit ridiculous. How could the great second young master of the Zhang family like me fall on hard times? Completely impossible, right? I was just spending money to accumulate some good karma for myself. After all, everyone around me is vicious and sinister. I have to accumulate more good karma, only then can I ensure that a loafer like me can live in luxury for the rest of my life. Then I fell from grace for 5 years. Just a mere 5 years. My seemingly upright and elite older brother, Zhang Lingchuan, after getting married. When this matter came to light, I was sunbathing on a private island. When I received the call, I even felt like laughing a little. It was within my expectations. My brother is, at his core, a weak and indecisive person. Yet he loves to pretend to be deeply affectionate. I couldn't even be bothered to go back and watch this farce. After all, marriages among the wealthy are all more or less the same. It's these two things, until my bank cards were frozen one by one. All the real estate under my name, stocks, and investment funds all changed. Owners overnight. Only then did I belatedly realize something was wrong. By the time I rushed back from the island, everything was already settled. The Jiang Corporation had changed its name to Liu. My father was prosecuted for numerous economic crimes. The evidence was conclusive. He would basically have to spend the rest of his life singing tears behind bars in prison. My brother Jiang Lingchuan, left with nothing. And I, a useless person who only wanted to be a freeloader, was not spared either. The slush fund I had painstakingly saved for over 20 years was gone. I stood in front of my penthouse apartment, looking at the two expressionless bodyguards in black suits blocking me. My head was buzzing. Hey sis, if you want revenge then get revenge. Kill my brainless brother. I have no objection, but you sent my father to prison and hollowed out the Jiang Corporation? What's the meaning of this? Thinking of this, my blood boiled with anger. Am I living in some sort of female-led revenge novel, and become the cannon fodder relative who gets conveniently dealt with? Just then the door opened. Liu Qingsu was sitting on my favorite Italian sofa, elegantly swirling a glass of wine. 5 years have passed. She was even more beautiful and colder than before. That powerful aura of being in control of everything was suffocating. She saw me and put down her wine glass, smiling gently at me. Xiaoyu, you're back? I said nothing. Just stared at her. She stood up and walked towards me step by step. She reached out, wanting to touch my face. Don't look at me like that. I didn't want this either. I tilted my head to avoid her. She wasn't angry and retracted her hand. She said slowly, your brother is too stupid. I gave him a chance. Unfortunately, he didn't cherish it. Liu Qingsu shook her head, looking at my expression with a hint of mockery. So this is the reason you dealt with our whole family? She paused for a moment. Her voice carried a trace of allure. But things are different now. He was the one who wronged me first. My revenge is perfectly justified now. I don't need a husband like that. With that, she took a step closer to me, carrying a strong sense of invasion. Xiaoyu, are you interested in staying with me? I can take care of you just like before. Hearing that, I laughed until tears came out. I wiped the corners of my eyes and looked at Liu Qingsu's flawlessly perfect face. Hearing you say that, I'm starting to suspect you sent him off with your own hands. The smile on her face finally stiffened. Although it was just for a moment, I still caught it. The last bit of wishful thinking in my heart vanished, as expected. This woman has been a lunatic from the very beginning. She would stop at nothing to achieve her goals. I retracted my smile and looked at her expressionlessly, then slowly gave her the middle finger in contempt. The last trace of a smile on her face disappeared, replaced by an ice-cold indifference. You don't know what's good for you. She waved her hand without giving me another glance. The two bodyguards immediately stepped forward, one on my left and one on my right. They lifted me up like a chick. I was roughly thrown out of my own home. I stood in the empty hallway. I couldn't help but sneer if I had actually believed her demonic words and stayed once she got tired of me. I'm afraid I wouldn't even know how I died. I know very well I'm no match for her. Even an old fox like my father was plotted against by her, a hedonist like me who only knows how to eat and play. What do I have to fight her with? Staying away from this psycho is more important than anything. I took out my phone, opened the contacts list, and found the friends who always called me Brother Yu. I made the first call. Hello, young Master Zhou. This is Zheng Xiaoyu. The other end was silent for 3 seconds, cautiously. Who is this? Sorry, you've got the wrong number. The call was hung up. I was stunned for a moment, then laughed self-deprecatingly. I continued to the second number. The result was exactly the same. The third, the fourth, were either wrong numbers or no one answered at all. I leaned against the cold wall and deleted my so-called friends from my phone one by one. After deleting them all, only a few lonely family numbers remained on the screen. I sold everything of value I had on me. In total, I got less than 100,000 yuan. This amount of money before wouldn't have been enough for one night of my drinking money. Now it's my entire fortune. As I wandered aimlessly on the street, I somehow ended up back downstairs from my apartment. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. This won't do. You'll just find a factory to tighten screws. The requirements are low and it includes food and lodging. Anyway, after more than 20 years of a rich life, I've lived enough. I lowered my head, calculating as I walked. I suddenly bumped into a soft embrace. A light, fresh scent wafted by. I instinctively wanted to apologize, but as I looked up, I suddenly met a pair of clear eyes. It was a girl with a delicate face. She looked a little familiar, but I couldn't remember where I had met her, but she clearly knew me. I could clearly see in her eyes the moment she recognized me. An indescribable joy and relief erupted. Her lips moved, as if she wanted to say something, but then she seemed to realize something. In the end, she just hurriedly and clumsily took a phone out of her pocket and quickly typed on it. The phone screen lit up. Mr. Jung, you still remember me? I looked at the words Mr. Jung. Not many people call me that these days. I took a closer look at her face. Fragments of memory began to slowly piece themselves together. A sudden realization hit me, a little surprised. The trembling figure in the supermarket 5 years ago. The girl who took care of her grandmother in the small, dilapidated house. It's you. Her eyes immediately lit up with surprise. She nodded her head vigorously. The joy was almost overflowing from her clear eyes. I was even more confused. Why are you here? She quickly typed again and held the phone up to me. The screen read, I saw the news about the Jung family situation. I was very worried about you. I guessed you might come back here to check, so I've been waiting here since yesterday. My heart felt like it had been struck by something. In other words, in the 24 hours since I was kicked out, she had been waiting downstairs at the apartment I could no longer enter, using the clumsiest method to wait for an uncertain possibility. A surreal and complex emotion welled up, while my so-called friends were busy cutting ties with me. A young girl I had almost forgotten was here waiting for me for a whole day and night. I pursed my lips, wanting to say something. She seemed to see my embarrassment. New words appeared on the phone screen. Do you have nowhere to go? I was silent, taking it as a silent admission. She put her phone away, then she did something I absolutely didn't expect. She reached out and gently tugged on the sleeve of my hoodie. Her grip was very light. I could have easily pulled away, but the pleading tug from the sleeve was like an invisible chain that kept me from moving. She pulled me around and led me towards the street corner. As if possessed, I didn't resist and just followed behind her. We arrived at a small shop. The bakery storefront emanated a warm light. The shop's name was Little Light Bakery. The shop was closed, but the lights in the display case were still on. She used a key to open the shop door, then turned back and gestured with her eyes for me to come in. The shop wasn't big, but it was clean and tidy. The air was filled with the smell of butter and wheat from under the counter. She took out a carefully laminated folder, from which she pulled out a yellowed piece of paper and pushed it in front of me. It was the insurance clause I'd scribbled down 5 years ago. In case one day I fall on hard times when I'm begging on the streets, just remember to give me a bowl of rice. She pointed to the words on it, then pointed to me, then to herself and this bakery. Her eyes were as serious as if she were fulfilling a sacred contract. Finally, she turned around and from the oven took out a still warm croissant and held it out to me. There was no pity, no sympathy, just a matter-of-factness that it was now my turn. I took the bread, took a bite. The taste, although not as good as the high-end food I used to eat, it had a reassuring feeling. Are you guys still hiring? The girl was stunned for a moment. Immediately after, a radiant smile bloomed on her face. She nodded vigorously. That day, the hazy first half of my life came to an end, and the second half of my life became tied to this little bakery called Little Light, inextricably linked together, and my boss was a mute girl whom I thought I would never see again. A girl named Su Wei, thanks to the money I sponsored her with and her own savings. After graduating from university, she opened this bakery on this street. The storefront wasn't large, but business was quite good. The neighbors all seemed to be particularly caring. They would always take a detour to come here, buy some bread, and chat for a bit. It's not easy for a young girl on her own. Now it's better. She has someone to help. Just looking at him is reassuring. I wore an apron with a little bear print, clumsily packing freshly baked toast. Hearing these words, I felt no ripples in my heart. Reassuring. Me, a lazy bum, so useless I can't tell grains apart. How could they tell that I was reassuring? But my presence did indeed lighten her burden. At least for heavy tasks like carrying bags of flour and sugar, a small, frail girl like her no longer had to grit her teeth and struggle to do them. In the evening, the shop closed. We would return to the small apartment upstairs. If the idiom a house with nothing but 4 bare walls described her previous place, then this place could probably be considered a house with nothing but 1 wall, 1 dining table, 2 chairs, 1 sofa, a small room partitioned off from the balcony. That was my bedroom. It was even smaller than the bathroom in my previous mansion, but I slept more soundly than on any night in the past 20+ years. There were no schemes, no pretense. In the air, there was only the faint scent of wheat wafting up from downstairs. I started learning to be an ordinary person, learning how to sweep the floor without kicking up dust everywhere, learning how to use a pressure cooker to make congee without blowing up the kitchen. Most of the time, the results were disastrous. I mistook salt for sugar and made a pot of incredibly salty red bean soup. She took a taste, her little face scrunched up, but she didn't spit it out. She just silently drank a large glass of water, then picked up a pen and wrote in her notebook. The taste is very unique. Next time, you can use a little less sugar. I looked at her serious expression, both angry and amused. I snatched the bowl and threw it in the trash. From then on, I started to learn sign language. I bought a pile of textbooks. Every night, I'd wait until she was asleep. In my small room, I practiced over and over again with my phone screen, from the simplest phrases like hello, thank you, to today, you've worked hard, and good night. The first time I used slightly awkward gestures to tell her, good morning, she froze. Then, in her usually calm eyes, it was as if a star had suddenly fallen in, astonishingly bright. She also raised her hand and replied to me very seriously. At that moment, I felt that in my past 20+ years, there had never been a moment where doing something felt as worthwhile as now. The days passed just like that, gradually getting better. I went from being a fool who didn't know how to use an oven to a baking apprentice who could skillfully whip cream and pipe flowers. The shop's business got better and better. We even took over the shop next door and expanded the storefront. I also had a decent amount of money in my account again, but it was enough savings for me to move out and rent a place. Several times I wanted to talk to Su Wei about this, but I swallowed the words every time they reached my lips. Move out to where? To eat what? Being alone is so boring. Besides, it's not easy for a young girl like her. I can lend a hand. I found a few reasons for myself in my heart, and then stayed here with peace of mind. Sui never mentioned it either. She seemed to have tacitly accepted my existence. I don't believe in love. My father and my brother are the best counterexamples. But the peace of being with Sui was addictive. I shook my head to chase these random thoughts from my mind. It's almost noon. I have to go prepare lunch for her. I was taking off my apron, preparing to go upstairs, but just then, a familiar figure pushed open the shop door and walked in. The person who came was wearing a well-fitting business suit, exquisite makeup, her hair was tied up neatly in a bun, her whole being exuded the elite aura of a successful person. It was Bai Ningbing. I hadn't seen her in 5 years. The insecurity and destitution from poverty on her had been completely washed away. She was no longer the cold school beauty in a faded uniform, begging me anymore. Now she was refined and perfect. Behind her was a young man, looking to be in his early 20s, wearing a suit and leather shoes. He looked like a recent male college graduate. His eyes were full of unconcealed contempt for me, probably a male assistant. Bai Ningbing's gaze paused for a moment on my little bare apron. Her brows furrowed imperceptibly, but she quickly returned to that polite smile. Zhang Xiaoyu, long time no see. I nodded, as a greeting. The action of taking off my apron didn't stop. She seemed to want to ask something but felt it wasn't appropriate. In the end, she took a check from her bag and pushed it in front of me. This is 1 million. I know there are still a few years left until our 10-year agreement, but I have the ability to pay now, so I want to pay you back in advance. I glanced at the number on the check, picked it up and stuffed it in my pocket. Thanks. This is what I deserve. Although I never expected to get it back. The male assistant behind her saw how quickly I took the money. The contempt in his eyes grew stronger. Bai Ningbing quickly adjusted her expression. Her gaze swept over our small bakery, finally landing on my face. It was a look I couldn't be more familiar with, carrying a condescending sympathy. Xiao Yu, I've heard about what happened to your family. If you don't have a suitable place to go right now, you can come to my company. My husband and I just started the company not long ago. We're in need of people right now. Looking at her deliberately pitiful expression made me feel nauseous. That transaction back then was my investment. Now she's repaying the debt. We're even. But now she's putting on this act, wanting to turn her former creditor into an object of her charity. I looked at the male assistant beside her with an increasingly unfriendly gaze and suddenly understood she was enjoying the pleasure of saving others, just like how I enjoyed her destitution back then. Now she was also enjoying my downfall. It's just that she's more hypocritical than I am. Having to put on a warm facade, I coldly refused. No need. I'm doing just fine here. The smile on Bai Ningbing's face froze. Xiao Yu, don't be sullen. I know what kind of life you used to live. I interrupted her, my voice already laced with impatience. I said, I don't need it. She finally stopped insisting. A trace of displeasure appeared on her beautiful face. Fine then. If you've already decided, then I won't force you. The moment she turned around, the male assistant behind her immediately took a step forward. Attentively, he reached out and gently supported her arm. Bai Ningbing also naturally tilted her head, giving him a smile that only the two of them could understand. It was at this moment that I pretended to casually pick up my phone and silently press the shutter button in their direction. The angle was very good. In the photo, the male assistant's hand was almost pressed against her waist, and the smile on her face. Anyone who saw it wouldn't think that it was just an expression for an ordinary subordinate. I raised my phone, waved at them. Take care, I won't see you out. Then I spent 2.5 minutes finding her husband's public email address online. Then I anonymously sent that photo over. After doing all this, I deleted the photo in the sending history. My mood became much lighter. I quietly finished lunch with Su Wei. My mind also gradually calmed down. I leaned against the counter, thinking about how to use this 1 million. The number on it was so clear it was a bit dazzling. How long has it been since I've seen so much money? At least our lives would finally no longer be so tight, and there's the new equipment that Su Wei has always longed for. The more I thought about it, the happier I became. I've never felt that 1 million could be so useful. Just then, the wind chime at the door tinkled. A clear yet deliberately weak voice interrupted my train of thought. Xiao Yu? I turned my head and saw Lu Ruyan. Oh, quite a few acquaintances are visiting today. If I remember correctly. Is there something you need? I leaned against the counter, expressionless. She bit her lip. Her glistening eyes were brimming with tears. That look of wanting to speak but hesitating made me feel nauseous. Lu Ruyan's voice carried a hint of grievance. I wanted to see you, second Miss Liu. What play are you acting in now? I almost laughed out loud. Her eyes immediately turned red, as if she had suffered a great injustice. Xiao Yu, I know I was very foolish before. I did many wrong things. I always thought I liked a passionate, fiery love. But now I understand. What I really want is just a stable family. Her tone was sincere. Her eyes were full of deep affection. She raised her head. Those watery eyes stared at me intently, filled with deep affection and memories. Zhang Xiao Yu, let's start over. I know your situation now. My sister really went too far, but it's okay. I can support you. Her tone carried a hint of pity and charity. Yo, it's that again? The prodigal son returns act, huh? But don't get it twisted. When did I ever start with you? I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. My thoughts drifted back to a few years ago. The wedding was both grand and touching. At the wedding she cried and said she was the light of his life, the happiness she held on to despite everything. At that time I was standing below the stage looking at that idiot who was moved to tears. I only had one thought in my mind. This guy is done for. As expected, less than 2 years after getting married, Liu Ruyan got tired of it. When the passion faded, marriage returned to the daily grind. She naturally became bored. Then a green tea guy appeared at the right time. Luckily that poor guy wasn't completely useless. He held evidence against Liu Ruyan, wanting to save some face for himself. Then he disappeared. There are no such coincidences under the heavens. Behind this, it must have been the work of my future sister-in-law, Liu Qingshu. Pulling back my thoughts, I looked at Liu Ruyan in front of me, still acting out her drama of deep affection. The corners of my mouth curled up even more. Liu Ruyan, do you think all men are fools? The expression on her face froze. Your husband's funeral was held very grandly, I began slowly. I saw it on the news. You cried your heart out. It was truly heartbreaking to hear, and tear-jerking to see. It's just a pity that, if I hadn't been in front of the hotel that night, and seen someone who looked a lot like you, arm in arm with a handsome guy, getting into the elevator, Liu Ruyan's face immediately turned pale. Oh right. It seems that handsome guy didn't get to be smug for long. He jumped off a building not long after. Liu Ruyan, aren't you tired? I took a step forward, looking straight into her trembling pupils, wearing a mask and acting every day. Don't you find it disgusting? I forced her to back away continuously. She finally bumped into the doorframe. Her whole body trembled like a leaf in the autumn wind. You're talking nonsense. Her outwardly strong but inwardly weak rebuttal was as feeble as if she was out of breath. I couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with her anymore. I wasn't worried she would retaliate against me. A woman so obsessed with playing the role of a saint would never allow herself to lose her composure, to get angry out of shame. To her, her image was more important than her life. She had worn that mask for too long. It was stuck to her face. It couldn't be taken off anymore. Get out. She looked as if she had been granted amnesty and stumbled outside. Her retreating figure looked incredibly pathetic. The shop finally became quiet again. I let out a long sigh of relief. It felt like I had vented all the bad luck accumulated over the past 5 years. Light footsteps sounded from the stairs. Su Wei came down carrying a bowl of freshly made sweet soup. She walked up to me and handed me the bowl. Her eyes asked me what had happened. I shook my head, signaling that it was nothing. Su Wei gestured in sign language. Her expression was worried. But you don't look happy. I looked into her clear eyes and smiled. Without putting the bowl down, I used my slightly clumsy sign language to gesture. I'm very okay. She understood. A sweet smile bloomed on her face. The sunlight shone in from the window, falling on us. Warm. After that day, I no longer paid attention to the affairs of that circle and completely cut off contact with them. Now I just want to live a good life with Su Wei, to run this small shop and live a quiet life. Every morning at 5 o'clock, I would wake up half an hour earlier than her, to go downstairs and prepare the first batch of bread dough. When she came downstairs, still sleepy-eyed, the kitchen was already filled with the faint scent of wheat. The hot water had also been boiled. She would always sign good morning to me first, then skillfully tie on her apron and start preparing today's desserts. We rarely spoke, but our coordination became more and more in sync. Sometimes when it was busy, she would get so anxious she'd break out in a sweat. I would hand her a glass of ice water. When she took the glass Her fingers would occasionally brush against the back of my hand. Cool, soft. I started to notice all her habits. She also no longer had to carefully guess my thoughts. Life was very fulfilling. During the day, we ran the shop together. In the evening, she would teach me how to make more complex desserts. Sometimes we could have a full conversation all evening without needing pen and paper. This understanding made me feel at ease. I began to seriously consider a question. I want to marry her. I don't believe in love, but I started to believe that some people are born to be together. I simply wanted to continue like this with her forever. 3 months later, I confessed to her, more accurately, I proposed. That day was her birthday. I secretly prepared a small surprise for her in the shop. When she came downstairs in the evening, the entire shop was lit with candles. She stood stunned at the top of the stairs, covering her mouth with her hands. I walked up to her, knelt on one knee, and took out a diamond ring. Su Wei. I don't know how to say beautiful words. I also don't believe in vows of eternal love, but I want to be with you, and run this shop until we can no longer walk. Will you marry me? She cried. Her tears were like a broken string of pearls, falling to the ground drop by drop. She nodded vigorously, then held out her hand for me to put the ring on her. The ring was a bit loose, her hand was too thin, but she clenched her fist, not letting it fall off. I hugged her, smelling the faint fragrance in her hair. At that moment, I suddenly felt that my past 20+ years of life were all in preparation for meeting her. Our wedding was held very simply. The scale wasn't very large. We only invited the neighbors and a few classmates I was on good terms with. I didn't think about putting on any kind of show. I just wanted to give Sui a proper wedding. The day before the wedding, I went to the barber shop to get a trim and bought myself a decent suit. Sui's wedding dress was chosen by both of us. When she tried it on, she seemed to glow. I stood outside the fitting room, looking at her in the mirror. I suddenly felt it was a bit unreal. This beautiful, angelic girl was really going to marry me. On the wedding day, everything went very smoothly. Sui's grandmother's health had improved a lot. She came to our wedding in a wheelchair. The old lady held my hand and said in a weak voice, "Thank you for taking care of our Xiaowei." I was a little embarrassed. It's she who takes care of me. During the ring exchange, Sui's hand was trembling. I held her hand and whispered a sentence in her ear. "Don't be nervous. It's just a formality," she chuckled. The tension immediately disappeared. "Mr. Jiang Xiaoyu, do you take Miss Sui to be your wife, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love her and protect her?" "I do, Miss Sui. Do you take Mr. Jiang Xiaoyu to be your husband, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love him and respect him?" Sui couldn't speak, but she nodded vigorously. Then she used sign language to gesture. "I do." The officiant was a bit stunned, not knowing what to do. I smiled and translated for her. She said she does. Warm applause erupted from below the stage. When it came to the kiss, she was a little shy. Her face was as red as an apple. I gently kissed her lips, very lightly, very gently, as if I was afraid of hurting her. Then I leaned into her ear and said, "Mrs. Jiang, I look forward to your guidance from now on." She laughed so hard in my arms that her shoulders shook. My classmates also came one by one to toast us. A former roommate I was quite close with said, "Xiaoyu, you've changed. You used to seem indifferent to everything. Now you look like a normal person." I looked at Sui talking with her grandmother and smiled. Perhaps it's because I now have someone worth caring about. After the wedding ended, we returned to our home upstairs. Everything was the same as before, except for a few more bouquets and gifts received at the wedding. Sui took off her wedding dress and changed into her usual home clothes. She cooked a late-night snack for me in the kitchen. I stood at the kitchen door, watching her busy figure. I suddenly felt very content. This is the life I want. 2 people living a simple life. She came over with the late-night snack, saw me spacing out, waved her hand in front of my face. "What are you thinking about?" "Thinking about you?" Her face turned red again, and she playfully hit me lightly. Then she wrote in her notebook, "Jiang Xiaoyu, we're married now. Do you have any regrets?" I shook my head. "No regrets." "What about you?" "No regrets either. It just feels a bit unreal. Like I'm dreaming." I reached out and pinched her cheek. "Does it hurt?" She held her face and glared at me, then wrote in the notebook, "This isn't a dream. Also, I love you." When Sui wrote down those 3 words, her fingers were trembling slightly. Under the dim yellow light, her eyelashes were like butterfly wings wet with rain. I stared at that line of words. My heart felt like it had been struck by something. It wasn't the racing heartbeat from a school beauty's confession in my youth, nor was it the vain satisfaction of throwing money around, but a dense, dull ache, accompanied by an unprecedented sense of stability. I took the pen from her hand, closed the notebook, and deliberately put on a serious face. "Mrs. Jiang, it's so late. Are you trying to give me a sleepless night by writing this?" She hurriedly waved her hands, her face flushed, clumsily signing, "It's true." I sighed and pulled her into my arms, my chin resting on her soft hair. I know. The person in my arms was quiet. Her light breath brushed against my neck. At that moment, I suddenly felt that things like the Jiang family's wealth, or Liu Qingsu, Bai Ningbing, what I have now is worth more than the past 20 years combined. But this thing called fate always trips you up when you're happiest. Life after marriage was like bread rising in the oven, warm and fulfilling. We woke up at 4 in the morning to knead dough, and at 6, the first batch of croissants came out of the oven. The whole house smelled wonderful. Sui taught me how to pipe cream. My hands were clumsy. I always smeared the cream everywhere. She didn't get angry. She would hold my hand and guide me bit by bit. After noon, when there were fewer customers, she would nap on the counter. The sunlight streamed through the glass window, casting tiny specks of light on her face. I would often stare blankly at her sleeping. How could this girl be so pure, as if she had never been tainted by this muddy world? But the mud will eventually splash. One rainy night, the shop was about to close. A few drunkards barged through the glass door. The leader was a local hooligan, named Qiang Gi. He had come to collect protection money before, but I chased him away with a broom. Now, he reeked of alcohol. He kicked over the potted plant at the door with 1 foot. His tone was arrogant. "Get that mute girl out here." Sui was checking the account books. She jumped when she heard the noise and instinctively looked towards me. I pushed her behind me and picked up a rolling pin. "Looking for trouble?" Qiang Gi sneered, revealing a set of yellow teeth. "Young Master Jiang, do you still think you're a big shot? I heard you married a mute." "Brothers, let's have a celebratory drink." The thugs behind him burst into laughter. Their eyes were glued to Sui. It was disgusting. I gripped the rolling pin tightly. My knuckles turned white. "Get out. So protective, huh?" he said as he took a step closer. The smell of alcohol hit my face. "You don't want to run this shop anymore?" Suddenly, Sui emerged from behind me, holding a box of freshly baked cookies. She forced a smile and gestured towards them, meaning to invite them to eat. At that moment, my heart felt like it was being pricked by needles. This silly girl always thought kindness could dissolve malice. Qiang Gi knocked the paper box away. Cookies shattered all over the floor. Who would eat this stuff? He reached out to grab Sui's wrist. I completely exploded. The rolling pin swung straight at him. In the chaos, I don't know how many times I was punched and kicked. I only remember protecting Sui tightly in the corner of the counter. Police sirens sounded from far to near. The thugs scattered in an instant, trembling. Sui reached out to touch the streak of blood at the corner of my mouth. Big teardrops fell one by one, but she couldn't make a single sound. I wiped my face and forced a smile. "What are you crying for? Your husband isn't dead yet." She cried even harder, curling up in my arms like a frightened little animal. That night, she slept holding my arm all night. The slightest movement would wake her up. I looked at the dark circles under her eyes. Fear rose in my heart after the violence. What if I hadn't been able to protect her today? The next day I bought a solid steel rod at a flea market and placed it under the counter. When Sui saw it, she shook her head vigorously at me. I tapped on the steel rod and signed to her. For self-defense, I won't use it. She finally lowered her eyes and wrote in her notebook. I'm afraid you'll get hurt. Then I'm even more afraid you'll get hurt. I patted her head. Sui, now you're all I have. She looked up at me, her eyes moist, and finally nodded gently. The peaceful days didn't last long. Lu Ruyan appeared again like a lingering ghost. This time she didn't enter the shop, but drove a flashy red sports car and stopped by the roadside. Sunglasses covered half her face. She beckoned to me with her finger. I was carrying a bag of flour and couldn't be bothered with her, so she got out of the car, leaned against the car door and smiled. Jiang Xiaoyu, does your wife know how you helped Bai Ningbing? Her tone was provocative. My hand slipped. The bag of flour fell heavily to the ground, kicking up a cloud of white dust. Sui heard the noise and ran out from the shop, looking at us suspiciously. Lu Ruyan took off her sunglasses and glanced over Sui with unconcealed pity. How pitiful, following a useless guy like you who can't even afford a decent wedding. I clenched my fists. Veins throbbed on them. Lu Ruyan, shut your mouth. What? Are you scared? You weren't like this back then, the school beauty. When she begged you, didn't you enjoy that feeling of charity? Now you're pretending to be so deeply in love. Sui didn't understand Lu Ruyan's words, but she could feel the tense atmosphere. She gently tugged at my shirt hem. Her eyes were filled with worry. I took a deep breath, suppressed my anger, turned and signed to Sui. It's nothing. You go inside first. Sui hesitated, not moving. Lu Ruyan suddenly played a recording on her phone. It was Bai Ningbing's sobbing voice in the small grove that year. I'm willing to give you my heart. Everything I have is yours, as long as you can agree to one thing for me. I'm not a philanthropist. Sui's face turned pale instantly. She looked at me, then at Liu Ruyan. Her lips trembled, but she couldn't make a sound. Liu Ruyan smugly put her phone away. Little sister, do you think he's a good person? He only helped Bai Ningbing to enjoy the misery of others. Helping you was probably just a whim. You're talking nonsense. I completely lost control. I rushed forward to snatch the phone. Liu Ruyan screamed and hid in the car, locking the car door tightly. The sports car sped away, leaving only me and Sui standing in a cloud of dust. She lowered her head. Her shoulders trembled slightly. I wanted to touch her, but she subconsciously took a step back. That step back was like a knife to my heart. That night, after closing the shop, the atmosphere in the attic was suffocating. Sui had her back to me, tidying up the bed. She never looked at me. I turned her by the shoulders, forcing her to face me. Do you believe her? Sui bit her lip, her eyes filled with tears. She wrote in her notebook, is what she said true? It's true, but not entirely. I wiped my face. I recounted how I rejected Bai Ningbing that year and how the contract was drawn up. I told her in detail. Sui, I admit I'm not a good person, but with you I never thought of it as charity. She was silent for a long time, so long that I thought she would never speak to me again. Finally, she slowly raised her hand to sign. I'm scared. Scared of what? I'm scared that one day you'll find me boring and you won't need me anymore. Her fingers were trembling. I have nothing. I only have you. My heart clenched. I pulled her tightly into my arms. Silly, it's me, who only has you. That night, we held each other as we slept, like two wounded animals licking each other's wounds. But Liu Ruyan's words were like a thorn in Sui's heart. She became sensitive. If I came home 10 minutes late, she would be on pins and needles. If a female customer chatted with me for a bit, she would quietly walk away. I noticed it, but I didn't know how to resolve it, until I woke up late one night and found the space beside me empty. Sui was curled up in a corner of the balcony, crying silently under the moonlight. I walked over and hugged her from behind. Her body stiffened, then softened. She buried her face in my chest. Sui, let me tell you a story. I told her about my father, my mother, my brother, and Liu Qingshu. I told her about the rot beneath that family's glamorous facade. I used to not believe in feelings. I felt everything was a transaction of interests, but you're different. I gently wiped away her tears. You make me feel that there's still some humanity in life. She looked up under the moonlight. Her eyes were like black glass submerged in water. She slowly raised her hand to trace my eyebrows, my eyes, the bridge of my nose finally stopping on my lips. Then she leaned in and gave me a very light kiss. It was a pure kiss, devoid of any desire, like the first snow falling on a palm. I was stunned, then responded to her. In that kiss, something quietly melted away. The thorn that Liu Ruyan had planted was silently removed. Life returned to peace, but danger always lurked in the shadows. One afternoon, an uninvited guest arrived at the shop. Liu Qingshu. 5 years had passed. She had become even more elegant and noble. Her custom-made outfit was completely out of place in the cramped bakery. She didn't bring any bodyguards. She was alone. When her gaze fell on Sui, it carried a cold, scrutinizing look. Is this the life you chose? Living in a place like this? Playing house with a mute girl? I shielded Sui behind me. If you have something to say, say it. She then found a chair and sat down on her own. Xiaoyu, you're still so naive. I recently found some interesting things. About your little wife's background. Sui suddenly gripped my arm tightly. Liu Qingshu calmly opened her handbag and took out a yellowed photograph. She pushed it across. In the photo was a young man and woman. The man's features somewhat resembled Sui's. The woman was holding a newborn baby. Your grandmother never told you, did she? She looked at Sui, a cold smile playing on her lips. Your parents didn't die of illness. It was a car accident, and the person who hit and killed them was named Jiang Haishan, Xiaoyu. It was your father, drunk driving. The air instantly froze. My head buzzed. I could barely stand. Sui stared at the photo, her face as white as a sheet of paper. Surprised? Liu Qingshu stood up, looking down on us. Jiang Xiaoyu, your father killed her parents, and now you pretend to be so in love and marry her? How ironic. Shut up. I roared, but my voice trembled. Liu Qingshu leaned down close to Sui's ear and said in a whisper, Little sister, guess what? Is he good to you out of guilt? After saying that, she turned and left, as if she had never been there, leaving behind only a hellish, dead silence. Sui was motionless, as if her soul had been sucked out. I reached out to touch her, but she recoiled as if shocked. Her eyes were empty and distant. Sui, let me explain. I didn't. Sui suddenly pushed me away. She ran upstairs and with a slam locked the attic door. I chased after her, desperately knocking on the door. There was no answer from inside. A moment later, a scrap of paper was slipped under the door. On it were just a few trembling words. Leave me alone for a while. That night, I sat outside the door until morning. There was no sound from the room, but I knew she wasn't sleeping either. The second day, Sui didn't come down to open the shop. I made porridge and brought it up and saw the door was still locked. The third day, the fourth day, it was the same. She locked herself in the room, not eating or drinking. The bomb Liu Qingshu had left had almost completely destroyed the little world we had just built. During the days Sui locked herself in the attic, I was like a caged animal pacing back and forth in the small shop. Flour bags were scattered on the floor. On the baking tray were burnt cookies from days ago. The air was filled with a sour smell of despair. Countless times I wanted to rush upstairs and break down that flimsy door, but every time I saw under the crack of the door, the leave me alone. Note, she slipped out, with handwriting growing more and more shaky. My outstretched hand would drop helplessly. I was afraid my approach would be the last straw that broke her. This feeling of helplessness was worse than facing the fall of my family that year. Back then, I could at least get angry, I could curse, I could pack my bags and leave, but now I didn't even have the right to be angry. The blood of the culprit flowed in my veins. King Su had found my weakest defense line perfectly. One blow and it shattered. Late on the fifth night, a suppressed sob, like the whimper of a small animal, came from the attic. Immediately after, there was a loud thud of something heavy falling to the ground. My heart stopped. I didn't care about anything else. I used the spare key to break in. I found Sue collapsed by the bed, her face ashen, her lips dry and cracked. Beside her was a spilled glass of water. It seemed she wanted to drink water, but she didn't even have that much strength. After days of not eating or drinking, her body had reached its limit. I rushed forward and picked her up. She was as light as a feather, as if she could disappear at any moment. Sue. I patted her face, my voice trembling so much I couldn't form words. Her eyelids fluttered, slowly opening a crack. Her empty gaze fell on my face, unfocused. At that moment, I was terrified she would just leave like that, afraid I wouldn't even have a chance to atone. I rushed downstairs like a madman, heated up porridge and made some warm water. I gently pried her lips open and carefully fed her with a small spoon. She swallowed mechanically, her eyes still lifeless. After feeding her half a bowl of porridge, I got some hot water and gently wiped her haggard face and cold limbs with a towel. Throughout the process, she was like a puppet, letting me do as I pleased. Only the occasional tears rolling down from the corner of her eyes proved that she was still alive. I tucked her in and lay down beside her, holding her tightly through the blanket. I didn't dare to sleep, afraid she would disappear the moment I closed my eyes. Sue, I whispered in her ear, my voice hoarse. I know you can hear me, you can hate me, you can blame me, whatever you want, but you can't die. If you die, what will I do? I, Jiang Xiaoyu, have lived for over 20 years. I've done my share of terrible things, but I've never thought of harming anyone. The sin my father committed, it'll take it. If you think killing me will satisfy your hatred, it'll give you a knife right now. Having said that, I took her hand and placed it over my heart. But you can't punish me this way, by punishing yourself. Your grandmother worked so hard to raise you, not for you to end like this. Do you remember the croissant you gave me? It was the most bitter and also the sweetest thing I've ever eaten. Bitter because of my downfall, sweet because of you. This shop is called Little Light. It was you who lit it up. If you're gone, this light will go out. My world will truly be plunged into darkness. I don't know how long I spoke, until my throat was dry and painful. The body of my arms remained cold. The next morning, I was about to get up to make her something to eat when my sleeve was gently tugged by a cold hand. I quickly turned and met her gaze. Though still red and swollen, there was a faint glimmer of light in her eyes. She looked at me, her lips trembling, without a sound, but her mouth faintly formed the word, water. I practically scrambled to get water, my hands shaking so much I spilled half of it. After helping her drink a few sips, she leaned against my chest and closed her eyes. A tear rolled down from the corner of her eye, but this time, it wasn't the silence of hopeless despair, but carried a hint of weary weakness. The realization that she was letting me get close almost made me cry with joy. The following days were a slow and difficult healing process. Sue's health gradually recovered, but the wound in her heart was far from healed. She became unusually quiet. Even more silent than before, she still ran the shop with me, but her movements were slow. She would often stare blankly at the bowl of flour. At night, she would still wake up with a start, drenched in a cold sweat. I would hold her, and I could feel her heart pounding wildly. She no longer used her notebook to communicate with me. When she occasionally needed to express something, it was only through simple gestures. I knew that thorn was still deeply embedded in her heart. Liu Qingsu's words were like venom, corroding her, and all the trust in the feelings between us. She began to subconsciously avoid my touch. If I put food in her bowl, she would freeze for a moment before accepting it. At night, if I wanted to hold her while we slept, she would stiffly turn away. This intentional distance was more suffocating than any argument. I understood she was struggling, re-examining everything between us. My help, my proposal, did my love all stem from a father's belated guilt? A guilt of the father being paid by the son? The turning point came one afternoon. An old lady who often came to buy whole wheat bread tremblingly handed us a thick envelope. She said it was specialty cookies her son sent from abroad, insisting on thanking us for taking care of her normally. Sue refused. But please accept it, dear. You and your husband are good people. It's rare to find such honest business people these days. You two must live well, the old lady mumbled as she held Sue's hand. After the old lady left, Sue stood behind the counter for a long time, holding the box of cookies. The sunlight through the window shone on her lowered eyelashes. I watched from a distance, not daring to disturb her. Suddenly she turned and came to me. She handed me the box of cookies, then pointed to the old storage box in the corner. Inside were a few of our wedding photos, and the tattered notebook she cherished, the notebook where I had written her insurance policy terms that year. I paused for a moment, then understood what she meant. I went over, took the notebook from the bottom of the box, dusted it off, and handed it to her. She took the notebook, flipped to the last blank page, took a pen, and started writing. Her hand was still a little shaky, but her strokes were very slow, very firm. I dreamt of my parents. They were in a very bright place, smiling at me. They didn't seem to blame you. Writing up to this point, she paused for a long time. The ink bled into a small dot on the paper, then she continued writing. I was thinking, if you were good to me out of guilt, then why when I was stealing bread? Was there only impatience in your eyes, and no pity? You just made one phone call wanting to deal with a troublesome matter. Why, when I agreed to marry you? Were you stunned for so long before your ears turned red? She looked up, her tear-filled eyes looking at me. In her eyes was extreme confusion and a glimmer of hope. She wasn't questioning me, but wanting an answer from me, an answer that could help her escape this nightmare. I looked at her, my heart feeling as if it were being gently held. I took the pen and wrote, stroke by stroke. Below her words, Sue, I'm not a good person. When I helped you, I didn't think too much about it. Maybe I was just in a good mood that day. Maybe I just didn't want any trouble. When I married you, I hadn't clearly thought if it was love or not. I just felt very at ease with you, not tired. But now I'm very clear. I can't stand to see you cry. I can't stand to see you bullied by others. When you're hurting, I just want to take the pain for you. This has nothing to do with who my father is. It only has to do with you being Sue. If I must speak of guilt, the only thing I feel guilty about is not meeting you sooner, letting you suffer so much, and not being able to protect you well, making you suffer again because of me. I handed the pen back to her. She looked at my words, and her tears fell even more, but the corners of her mouth curved up slightly. It was a smile that looked sadder than crying, but it was the most beautiful expression I had ever seen. She took the pen and firmly wrote 3 more words after mine. I believe you. Then she put the pen down, and took the initiative to reach out, gently taking my fingers. Her fingers were still cold, but that firm grip instantly dispelled all the gloom in my heart. That night, she finally stopped sleeping with her back to me. She curled up in my arms, like a fledgling that had finally found its nest. Her breathing was even and long. I listened to her breathe, feeling it was the most beautiful music in the world. We knew the scar was still there. Perhaps it would always be there, but at least we were starting to learn how to live with it. And because we shouldered this burden together, our bond, in turn, grew even stronger. The decision to leave the city was made a few days later. It wasn't entirely because of the danger from Liu Qingshu, but mostly because we wanted a change of environment, a place without the ghosts of the past, to truly start over. So we didn't hesitate at all, immediately. To her, wherever I was, that was home. We sold the little light bakery, packed our bags, prepared to move south. When the neighbors heard we were leaving, they came one by one to see us off, bringing all sorts of local specialties, big and small. Dear, if you're ever mistreated in the future, just come back here. I'll stand up for you. The old lady held Su-Wei's hand and wiped her tears. Su-Wei nodded, her eyes red, and put a bag of freshly baked cookies into the old lady's hands. The night before we left, we were clearing out the last things in the attic. Su-Wei pulled out a tin box from the bottom of the cabinet. Inside were her grandmother's belongings, a few old photos, and the insurance policy I wrote for her that year. The paper had yellowed, but the handwriting was still clear. If one day I fall on hard times and am begging on the street, just remember to give me a bowl of rice. She looked at that paper and suddenly laughed, laughing. She started to cry again. She took a pen and solemnly wrote a few words on the back. She handed it to me. For this entire life, my bowl of rice will always be half yours. My eyes burned. I pulled her into my arms. Okay, it's a deal. As the train started moving, the city that held so much of our pain and warmth gradually receded outside the window. Su-Wei leaned on my shoulder and fell asleep, her hand still tightly clutching a corner of my shirt. Sunlight streamed through the window onto her face, peaceful and serene. I lowered my head and kissed the top of hers. I closed my eyes. What the future holds, I don't know. But as long as she's here, wherever we go is home. We finally settled in a small coastal city. We used the money from selling the shop to open a smaller dessert store, naming it Sunset Moment. Su-Wei was in charge of baking. I handled the customers. Life was simple but quiet. She gradually stepped out of the darkness. A smile returned to her face. Sometimes in the quiet of the night, she would still jolt awake from a nightmare, but I would always hold her immediately, gently patting her back until she fell asleep again. One afternoon, a year later, we were strolling hand in hand by the sea. The sunset was like molten gold. The tide gently rose. Su-Wei suddenly stopped walking, pointing to something sparkling on the sand. I picked it up. It was a piece of glass rounded by the ocean waves. Under the sunset, it reflected a warm glow. She took the piece of glass and held it under the sunlight for a long time, then placed it in my palm, clasping my hands together and signaling for me to keep it safe. I teased her that this was our token of love. She nodded vigorously, her eyes sparkling. One afternoon, the weather was sweltering. There weren't many customers in the shop. Su-Vi was at the workstation preparing the batter for the next day. I sat behind the counter checking the account books. I heard a very faint sob. Looking up, I saw that Su-Vi, hand holding the whisk, had stopped. She was staring blankly out the window. Outside the window, a young father was walking by with his daughter on his back. The little girl's laughter, as clear as silver bells, echoed through the glass. I put down the account books and went to her side. She didn't look at me. Her gaze still followed the figures of the father and daughter until they disappeared at the end of the alley. Her profile looked a little pale in the afternoon sun. In her eyes was a complex emotion I couldn't describe, a mixture of longing and sorrow. I gently touched her hand. She came to her senses, forced a smile at me, and shook her head to signal she was fine. Then she lowered her head and began to whisk the batter in the bowl more forcefully, as if trying to drive something away with this action. I knew she was thinking of her parents, of the childhood that should have been spent with her parents, filled with happy laughter. It was a regret she could never make up for. Liu Thanhua's words were like a poisoned thorn. Even on sunny days, they would inadvertently prick her with pain. That night, after we closed the shop, we sat on the small steps by the back door, enjoying the sea breeze. The waves gently lapped against the shore. In the distance, the lights of fishing boats twinkled. Su-Vi leaned against my shoulder very quietly. I took her hand. Her palm was a little cold. Su-Vi, I broke the silence. Should we go visit them? Her body stiffened slightly. She looked up at me, puzzled. I mean, go visit your parents. I chose my words carefully. I know where the cemetery is. It was written in the documents Liu Thanhua left. We can go there and talk to them for a bit. Tell them that you're doing very well now, and also to say sorry on my father's behalf. The last few words were incredibly difficult for me to say, but I felt I had to say them. Su-Vi was stunned for a long time. Tears quickly welled up in her eyes, but she fought to keep them from falling. She looked at me, her gaze filled with inner conflict, with fear, but it eventually turned into some kind of resolution. She nodded vigorously. We chose a beautiful morning, closed the shop, and brought a bouquet that Su-Vi had arranged herself with white chrysanthemums and blue eustomas, and went to the cemetery on the outskirts of town. The cemetery was very quiet, nestled against a mountain and facing the sea. It was a peaceful resting place. Following the documents, we found their shared grave. The tombstone was very simple. A photo of Su-Vi's parents was engraved on it, now faded and unclear. Su-Vi walked to the grave, squatted down, and gently placed the bouquet down. She reached out, using her fingertips to wipe away the dust and fallen leaves from the tombstone, bit by bit. Her movements were gentle, as if touching a fragile dream. She didn't cry. She just wiped it silently, the sunlight illuminating her focused face. I stood behind her during this moment of closeness with her parents. After a long time, she stood up and turned around, beckoning me over. I walked over and stood beside her, facing the grave. The sea breeze blew through our hair and clothes. Su-Vi looked at the tombstone, then looked at me. Then, she raised her hands and began to speak in sign language. Her speed was very slow, as if every gesture carried the full weight of her thoughts. Dad, Mom, this is Jiang Tuvu, my husband. She paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and continued to sign. He treats me very well. We have our own little shop now, called Sunset Moment. Life is very peaceful. I'm very content. About what happened in the past, we both know now. Her gestures became a little heavy, but they were still firm. It was a terrible accident. I know it wasn't Tuvu's fault. He and his father are not the same. She turned her head to look at me, and her tears finally fell silently, but the corners of her mouth curved into a smile. She continued to sign to the tombstone. So, please don't blame him. And don't worry about me. I am very happy now. Truly, watching her use sign language to introduce me to her parents, to defend me, and to tell them about her happiness. I felt a lump in my throat, and my eyes grew hot. I reached out and squeezed her other hand tightly. I turned to face the tombstone and bowed deeply. After straightening up, I looked at the faded photo on the tombstone and said solemnly, Uncle, Auntie, I'm Jiang Tuvu. I'm sorry and thank you. Thank you for bringing Su-Vi into this world. Please, rest assured, as long as I'm alive I will not let her suffer anymore. I will use everything I have to protect her. I spoke very slowly, every word coming from the bottom of my heart. I knew that verbal promises were light, but this was the only thing I could do. After paying our respects, we walked hand in hand towards the hillside of the cemetery. On the way back, Su-Vi seemed particularly relieved, as if a burden she had carried for years had been lifted. She even proactively pointed at the wildflowers by the road, excitedly signaling to me that we could try using the leaves and stems of that flower to make natural dyes. From then on, I noticed a subtle change in Su-Vi. The faint gloom in her eyes seemed to have faded a lot. Her smile became brighter and more serene. She started to be more proactive in planning our future together, like what kind of flowers to plant in front of the shop, or, when we save enough money, whether we should rent the unit next door to expand the shop. She even signed that. I knew that trip to the cemetery was not only a comfort to her parents, but also a formal farewell to the past for both of us. We couldn't change the tragedy that had happened, but we could choose how to face the future. We had carefully poured out half a bowl of time, the one filled with those bitter memories, and then used the remaining half to add understanding and tolerance, as well as the candy Suvi made herself, to slowly and seriously savor the taste of the rest of our lives. One day after closing the shop, we sat by the sea watching the sunset. The sunset dyed the sea a magnificent, brilliant red. Suvi rested her head on my shoulder and suddenly wrote a few words gently in my palm. It wasn't sign language, but writing with her finger. I carefully made out that she had written sunset moment, full of joy. I lowered my head and kissed her hair.